All right, so now we're going to do a little introduction to the journal writing for FOSS Web, as well as the teacher's guide for electromagnetic force. In that poll we took, we found that some of you are brand new to electromagnetic force, and some of you are brand new to FOSS in general. So either way, the notebook setup has changed a little bit with second and then next gen editions. So we want to just give you kind of an overview real quick so that as we go through the investigations themselves, the terminology and the steps in it will be a little bit more familiar. So what you're going to need for this section will be your investigations guide. You'll need your notebook, okay, and also your resource book, just to touch base on a couple things in there. But we're going to start off here with your notebook. So if you could just take that out and open it up. So the notebook is sort of like a personal textbook, almost self-written, okay? This notebook is going to contain the table of contents and an index for your vocabulary, which I'll explain to you in just a minute. It'll also hold your focus questions, notebook responses, response sheets, diagrams and models that students create, as well as some reflections. So the students are going to make this book really their own. It's going to be very personal. And if you take a look at mine, it's chock full of stuff. Like, I love a chunky, crinkly sounding notebook. So it becomes really their best resource. Okay, so if you're opened up to the first page of the book, I'd like you to label it Table of Contents right on the top of the page. Okay, and this is exactly what it says. It's your table of contents. It's going to contain everything that's in the book. Anything of importance. Some little things you may not include in there, but anything that's meaningful that students may have to go back to, that you may want to assess, you're going to want to have in your table of contents. So it's made up of 3 columns. The first one is the date. Second one is the title. So it's the title of whatever piece or sheet or what have you that you've got in there. And then your page number. Okay? Along with the page number, I'd like you to, at the bottom right-hand corner of your page, number this number 1. Okay, and you can, I know it's kind of small for those of you further back, but you can see in my book, it'll just look like a little dot to you maybe, but I've got all my pages numbered. So what I'd like you to do from here is to number your pages up to about 20, 25. I'll give you a minute or so to do that before we move on. If you don't get all the way that high, don't worry about it. You know your numbers, you can fill them in later. But you do use a good portion of this notebook, so those pages being numbered is important, and you need to emphasize that to your students as well. And give them that same time, you know, go ahead and number up to page 15, and then at the end of a class say, okay, we've got a minute left, number the next 10 pages in your notebook, you know, something like that. And that way they're always prepared to put things in their table of contents. Okay, so now wherever you are, you can stop that, and I'd like you to go to about 3 sheets from the back of your notebook, okay? This is going to be your vocabulary index, so you can go ahead and label that. I'm not concerned with numbers on this page because A, it's at the back of your book, and God knows what number that would be, but also because this index is just in the back of your book, and everything that you're labeling will have been before that, and those pages are numbered, so you're fine. Now, this can be set up in a couple of different ways. FOSS outlines it as sectioning it off by letter, okay, and putting the words in alphabetically, regardless of the investigation that they go along with. Which is fine. You know, if you're looking for a word that starts with B, bam, it's right under the letter B. What I find this to be a little bit seemingly disorganized or difficult to my eye is that you may, if you know you don't know how many words are going to start with the letter A through this whole module, then you may leave way too many spaces for one letter and not enough for another letter, and it may look very unbalanced, kind of sloppy. Now, you know your students best, you know yourself best. You need to do what works for you and your kids. The method that I use is a little bit different, and so rather than dividing it by letter, I divide it by investigation. And so what I have the students do is I'll give them the words for investigation 1, let's say, and there's a few more than that, but they're still alphabetical, but they are broken down also by investigation. So in a module like this that only has 4 investigations, that's not a really big deal. If you know the word starts with a B, you go to each investigation, you go a couple words down, and it should be there. Again, it's up to you. It needs to work for your students and it needs to work for you, okay? Um, so what will happen with your index is you're not going to put definitions back here. It's only the words, and you're going to indicate the page on which that word was used. So we're not all about giving the word, giving the definition, okay, and then having the students kind of memorize that and then just repeat it, and spit it back out. What we want them to do is really demonstrate an understanding of the word. Use it in context. Use it when labeling a diagram or a model. So anytime that these words are used within their notebook, okay, they're going to go back and they're going to label the page numbers where that word was used. So if they're looking for a definition for energy, maybe to answer a response sheet or even on an assessment of some sort, I sometimes do them open book. I have learners with special needs, and so sometimes they're not going to be able to memorize everything, but if they can know how to find information, then they'll be successful. So for all those purposes, having the page numbers in there is really helpful. And again, using the words in context rather than just, spitting back a definition from a book makes it a little bit more meaningful. Okay, so those are the basics of your notebook. So now we'll get started on the investigation guide. Okay, and that's the one that looks like this. Okay, it's got the binder on the end. If you don't have an investigation guide, I'll bring you up to the online version in just a second. So for those of you with the book, if you could please open up to page 10. Those of you without the book, I'm hoping you're familiar with the FOSS website. I'm lagging a little bit here. Sometimes it happens when we get a lot of people on here. Let me see if I can refresh this. There we go. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the FOSS website and you don't have an account, I'm going to ask you to try to make some time for that today, maybe during our next break or during lunch, because it is really helpful. And then if you have any troubleshooting to do, we can help you with that. So I'm already logged in, and we'll give it a second. There we go. And you'll notice there's a lot of kits here. If you haven't done this before, if you go down further on the page, you'll see all the books are basically backgrounded in purple. These are your 6 to 8 books. So you should be able to find electromagnetic force, okay? And you can add it to your FOSS modules. You'll see up here, the bottom one says add to my FOSS modules. You can do that, and then it will end up here under your FOSS modules. I've got all 3 grades, so I've got a ton of modules up here, and I get a little lazy and don't take them out when I'm done. But you can always move them back down to the bottom when you switch to another module, so this isn't so cluttered. Anyway, so we're going to click on electromagnetic force. For those of you using the book right now, I'm going to ask you just to put your eyes up at the screen for a second to see a couple of the other components, okay? First of all, resources via investigation. This will show you exactly what you need investigation by investigation. So I've got open investigation 2, and this is 2 part 1, and it gives you all your focus question. It gives you your teaching slides. Your teaching slides come with the kit. They're on FOSS Web, and it literally is a slideshow of everything you're going to do in order, and it's pretty well complete, but you will download it and you can alter it if you'd like. So if you want to add something to it, if you want to change something about it, you're welcome to do that, which is pretty handy, I think. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so you've also got your PDF-based book, okay, which is what we're going to focus on in just a second. But there's a couple of other things I'd like to show you as well. Let's see if we can get back to this. You've got your inventory list, your materials chapter, and things like that. You've got your notebook masters. So these are your notebook sheets. They're 2 to a page, so it saves you on paper, okay, for copying. And then when you cut these in half, they fit right into the notebook. You can see I've got plenty in here, okay. So these are really great to have. My suggestion is that you print the first copy and then use that copy to make copies. Then you lose that blacked out binder from your book when it doesn't lay flat on the copy machine, and you always have one on hand, so making copies is a little bit easier. Okay, Your assessment masters are in here as well. Then you've got down here your multimedia, so all of your simulations, all of your videos are here. You've got your teaching slides are down here, so you can download the ones you need for whatever investigation that you're on. You've got vocabulary, so you've got a list of the vocabulary words by investigation. You've also got a resource for definitions if you do choose to do that. And what's good about these definitions is they're simple and they're clear, so the students aren't left wondering what that word still means after looking it up. Focus questions are listed here, and then you've got your student ebook, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. So right now I'm going to go back to our investigation guide, and I'm going to ask you to turn to page 10. This takes just a second to load up. Right now these are flip books. They are working on making them a little bit more kind of interactive, where you can just go exactly where you want and you don't have to flip through all the pages. Some people love the sounds of the page. That's up to you. So we're starting off on page 10, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and here they'll tell you about the overview, the instructional design of this kit and all the kits from FOSS. And it explains to you how this makes up an active investigation. Okay, so you've got formative assessment, you've got using your science notebooks, science-centered learning and language, real-world problems, engaging with technology, and readings. Okay, so this is a pretty important page and always good to have a reference of. All right, if you would turn now to 21. Okay, on page 21, you will see these icons. There's a whole slew of them. So these icons stand for specific areas of, or specific content, okay, or reminders. So for example, you've got goggles for safety, small group discussion, vocabulary, recording in your notebooks, readings, technology. The question marks are for assessment, embedded, and more summative. Then you've got engineering practices. You've got an icon for that, math components, and homework. Also on these pages you will find EL notes for your English language learners. We'll give you some strategies for helping them. And also in each investigation you'll see a blue bar for each session that gives you the amount of time it's expected to take. So these sessions are considered to be 45 to 50 minutes long. All right, let's see, I think we want 40 next. We'll try page 40. And again, I really like the book, you know, to flip through the book itself. I find this a little bit difficult to look at all the time, but again, it is really handy for those of you, for example, that don't have the book now. So within the framework, we're going to talk about the connection to the next gen standards, okay, and it goes by investigation. So here's investigation 1. It lists your science and engineering practices, your connections to Common Core, and that's for your ELA learners. You've got your disciplinary core ideas and your cross-cutting concepts, okay? And again, this is going to be before every investigation as well, so when you see it in the book later, it will be familiar. All right, and if you turn to 62, please. Okay, your kit inventory list. Now, I find this to be really helpful, especially after you've used the module, because if you're like me, you get the 2 boxes, or I think there's 2 for this kit. You get your boxes, and it will say what's in every box. It's labeled on the front. But then by the time you're done with it, you've shifted things around and different things are in different boxes. So this is a nice checklist just to make sure that you've got everything you need and you're not running low on any materials. Okay, so the next page I'd like you to run to is page 71. Okay, and 71 brings us to the beginning, actually 71 brings us to the beginning of the module, okay? So this is investigation 1. It's called What is Force? They have a picture here, okay, which is something, you know, sometimes I will screenshot things like this and put it up. I use Active Inspire on my whiteboard, so I keep these flip charts going, and I can hold on to what I've done, what we do interactively, what we write within forms on there. So sometimes I'll open it up in that program and I'll put the picture up in the beginning. It gives us something to open up with, a little bit of a starter for discussion. Over here on the right, you've got part 1, 2, and 3, and the page numbers and titles for each of those. You've got the purpose of the investigation, the content. So this is your basic information that you expect your students to understand by the time you're done. The practices again. And then over here on the right, again, you've got your science and engineering practices, DCIs, and your cross-cutting concepts. So this is always somewhere really easy for you to see and really quick to refer to. All right, we're going to move on to 78. If you haven't noticed, when you put your page numbers in, it always brings you to the odd number first. Okay, so, or excuse me, the even number first. So you always have to switch over to the odd. So this is the beginning, this is a portion of what you'll get as far as learning for you. So you've got a scientific and historical background. This is always nice to check up on if it's something that you're not really familiar with. If it's content that you haven't done before, this is really helpful, okay? Also, on page 79, okay, right down here, you've got all of the vocabulary that's in Investigation 1, okay? So if you're doing your vocabulary index like I am, this is another place where you can find those words and have the students put them in their books without really discussing them or exploring them yet. All right, we're going to move on to 82. And there's that lovely page. Some people like it. So here I'd like you to focus on page 82, which is our conceptual flow, okay? This is a really neat visual. I'll make it smaller for you. It's a little tough to see, but of how all of the components of the investigation fit together, how they connect, okay? Let me go back to zoom in. You'll see the basic idea up here, okay? And then all of these different components that interact. Over here on the left, you'll see a more detailed explanation of exactly what this demonstrates. But this is something that you might even want to do up on a poster or with post-it notes or sentence strips or something where your students can actually help construct this flow chart to demonstrate their understanding of how all of these components are connected. So I find that to be kind of a helpful thing. All right, on page 83 is a list of our materials, okay? And it does actually show you pictures of them to help you out. So this is what the reading looks like, okay? There's a special spot right here for items supplied by the teachers. It includes a notebook for this one. Hopefully your students are bringing notebooks and some chart paper, okay, which you may want. And then it brings you down here to some of these pages. So this is that notebook sheet that I first showed you, and you'll find those. Those are in this resource, your teacher's resource guide. So when you get to the pages that are notebook sheets, they're not numbered as part of the book. So if you notice, when you look at it from the edge, half the pages look blue and about half of them look white. This is on the first white page of the book. There's different sections. You've got your assessment masters in here. You've got answers in here. All those sorts of things. So this book is really handy for that. And again, I still recommend making your first copy from your printer, but however it works for you. The embedded assessment notes. Are back here. I think I've saved them for you. I may not have. There we go. Embedded assessment notes, and I'll explain more to you about how to use this when we get to the end. Okay. And then your teaching slides, it tells you which slides to use. All right, moving on. Let me do it that way. All right, we've got your getting ready. So this is great. It's a quick start guide, how to schedule the time. You need one session for your assessment, which is essentially a survey to start off, and then 3 more sessions for active investigation. You've got some notes on the side. You'll have notes all throughout the margins of this book, which is really helpful. It tells you what you want to preview, okay, so that you know it's all set, what things you'll need to print and copy, what things you'll need to prepare, and what plans you need to do for assessment, okay? Here's another view of your embedded assessment. There are 3 sections on there, and again, we'll get back to that in just a minute. Okay. So now this is where they talk about materials prep, and here we are with guiding the investigation. Guiding the investigation is essentially where you start with your students, okay? Your focus question is listed here, even though we're not putting it out for the students yet. You've got all of your sessions. So the first session, the students are going to take their entry-level survey. These are basically like your objectives, okay? And it also tells you which step in the process this objective happens, okay? Your EL notes are here, okay? Starting a word wall, which is helpful with the words in bold, okay? I think we're all familiar with that. And it reminds you again, session 1 is 45 to 50 minutes. And the first thing we're going to do, here's one of those icons, okay, is assessment. And that's your entry-level survey. And as we get into investigation 1, you'll see what that looks like. On the next page, okay, again, we're into session 2. There's your ELL notes. You've got a notebook entry. This is your focus question, okay? When your students do the focus question, they don't need to share it right away, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that again in investigation 1 when we start it. Teaching notes, here's those notes I told you about. They're really helpful, okay? I'm going to back out here, okay? The other thing that I want to show you, and I believe we're on the next page now. Maybe not quite yet. All right, so if you go through some more of these pages, let's go up to 95. So on page 95, they'll show you a reading, okay? And this reading is in the student's resource book. This is the hardcover one here, okay? Now, what's good about this is, again, if you go back to the details on your module, if you go down here to ebook, you've got your PDF-based book, so students can follow it on the computer, or if they're at home, they can read it. The other thing that they have that's awesome is the audiobook. Okay, so you basically find the first reading, which is "The Force is with you," and you click it. There is
The
no
force
video,
is with you.
but you can hear
The
it's quite
skater
loud.
stands at the
You
edge
need
of the
video,
half pipe, ready
the
to
audio.
push off.
And so what I like to do is, if I'm absent for a day, or if the students need to do this at home, they have access to that audio. Again, for my students with special needs, reading is often one of their weakest skills. So this is really helpful. It encourages them to go through the reading, even if they're doing it by themselves. They're not kind of overwhelmed and frustrated by their struggles with the reading. So I really, really like this component quite a bit. All right, I want to take you back. Let's see. Well, let me give you this one first. So there's some think questions after the reading, and it tells you right here what to look for. So you can do the assessments that you need to do right there, okay? Notebook entries, okay, that you'll assess. I want to go back to page, let's say 93 perhaps. Let's see, here's 95. Let's see. Okay, maybe not. When we get into, here we go. So you're going to assess the progress here through the notebook entry. And this is where that embedded assessment sheet comes in. So they give you some things to look for. So there's one here, and the others are on the next page. Okay? And you just choose one, okay? At the beginning at least. Just choose one. So I'm going to choose students write that it takes force to move things. That's kind of like the basic, kind of simple, okay? And you're going to sample some notebooks, maybe 15, 5, whatever you can manage in 15 minutes. You don't want this to be overwhelming. One of the suggestions from the FOSS coordinator was that you put a colored dot on the back of all of their notebooks, kind of randomly, and then one day you say, okay, anyone with a blue dot, I want your notebooks. And so that way you get a sampling, and it's pretty general and pretty random, and it should give you a good idea of what you've got. When you go to your embedded assessment, okay, you would put investigation 1, part 1, and the date. You'd put in, a force is needed to move things. And then as you look through those samplings of notebooks, you can just put tally marks for who seems to get the idea, who doesn't get the idea. You can record the most common misconceptions or incomplete ideas. A lot of times, students will get most of it, but they're missing that one element. And then you can reflect on that and describe your next steps. And so you know how to maybe change the design of your next move, or take another direction, or back up if you need to. Okay? So that's really helpful too. So let's back this up. So again, we've got our reading element in there, and they offer you to do it for homework. They suggest you do it for homework. I often do it in the classroom. Again, my students struggle with the reading, and sometimes they're hesitant to do it. They're not motivated to do it. After we've used the audiobook a few times, that helps. But you can certainly do it in the classroom. You can do it for homework. You can do it, when the substitute is there. You can do it, any kind of time. I would suggest doing it in class maybe the first time or two to make sure the students really understand how to access the functions that they want and follow along with the reading and how to organize their questions. And then they should be ready to go. Okay, so that's the end of this investigation, or as far as we're going in the notebook. Here's again that embedded assessment, okay, that you want to put in here. And now we're going to head on to investigation 1 with Cindy.